Hi, friends. This is Sin, Confession, Projection, Now Injection, Part 5, or A Deeper Cut, based on the amazing continued conversation and questions that you guys are bringing as a result of your own engagement in the material. I want to first start out by clarifying and reiterating an answer that I gave on Sunday. And if you weren't there on Sunday, then you'll be hearing the original answer for the first time, in addition to what I'm going to include this time. The question was, one time I said that when you are looking at a so-called other person or experiencing a so-called other thing, that you're always only looking at and or experiencing and or relating with yourself. The question was, what the hell did you mean by that? Because when I'm looking at this other person, it sure seems like I'm looking at another person. My answer is twofold: relative and ultimate. The relative part I gave on Sunday, which I will give again now. The ultimate part I left out on Sunday and want to bring into consideration now. The relative answer is that when you, as a body mind persona conditioned complex, are interacting with, talking to, looking at, observing, experiencing another, whatever that other is, then 99% of the time, especially if you're not also anchored in the ultimate and also doing your work to clear out the layers of shadow and ego and projection and unresolution and nexus knots in your finite self, then you will be seeing, experiencing, relating with, looking at, talking to, basically a mirror reflection of one of those pieces of unresolution. You will be seeing that person not clearly, not purely, not in and of themselves, but interpreted and conditioned through your personal history, your cultural understanding, your wounds, your fears, your past, your future. past and future is one of the primary things that the remainder of this video is going to be about. So kind of register that in the back of your mind. Relative past, relative future, which ultimately do not exist. And so it's very rare, especially coming from the relative body mind, that you're seeing anyone or anything clearly. So you're only seeing yourself. You're only seeing your own projected fear, your own anticipated anxiety, your own understanding of who that person is based on something they did in the past, your own interpretation of what a sensation is, your own agenda, hopes, or dreams that are most likely ego-based, especially before and during doing this work. I would like to also remind you to just sort of keep it as a guideline that as you're just starting out, and you can go ahead and assume that you're just starting out until you know that you're no longer just starting out, if that makes sense. You'll just know when you've reached a threshold. Here at the beginning, some of you are still kind of asking, like, how do I know when it's the ego? How do I know when it's this? How do I know? You don't. Because we're not taught this stuff as children. So you start this journey as an adult child. You can go ahead and assume that most everything you do is tainted by the ego, by contraction, by some lie, and is most likely coming from a relative place, not the ultimate, until you know that you know that you know. I remember like asking grown-ups when I was a kid, how will I know who I'm supposed to marry? And they would always say, you'll just know. And I had never had any idea what they meant by that. Now, obviously, I do with Christy. And so I'm extrapolating that, making a parallel over to this work. You know, that thing, whether it's marriage or career or something practical in your life that you can't really explain it, but you just know. And other people in that same field of understanding know what you mean when you say you'll just know. And people outside of that field don't necessarily know what you mean. That's what I mean. So this calls for discernment and patience and trust. Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, used to say something like, and it's in German, I don't know German, I think it's been kind of mistranslated through the years, but something like, sin boldly, but trust or love God more boldly still. Relate that to our understanding of sin. It's not an excuse or a permission slip, but it's an acknowledgement that here at the beginning, when you're just starting to turn on the light of self-awareness, that it's a mixed bag of good intentions for sure. But even in good intentions, shadow can be there, ego can be there, fear can be there. And sometimes you don't know which is which. And some people give up before they discover which is which. And I'm telling you, you can get to know yourself, you can get to know your personality, you can get to know your unique flavor of ego You can get to know what it feels like in your body when you're projecting. You can get to know based on what's being reflected back to you, what you have just projected. You can get to know when something is relevant for you to look at and when you are playing a part in something relevant for someone else to look at. And some may say, who cares? Some may give up because that sounds too tricky. I just want to sin boldly and live my life. And that's fine. But for those of us who feel called, for those of us who have been touched by something deeper, and the journey is inevitable. For those of us who have been caught up in separateness and sin and suffering, and we know that it's causing a lot of problems, then we want to do this. So in any case, trust, surrender into, and go ahead and guarantee that for a while, your good intentions will be tainted with projection and sin. Sin in the way that I've been using the word in the past videos. If you've not watched those, I would highly recommend that you do. Forgetting, separateness, projection, believing in otherness, believing yourself to be a body mind, believing the exterior world to be outside of yourself, objectively real, autonomously operative outside of your awareness of it, etc. And so, to get back to the relative answer to that question, you're always looking at yourself in a relative conditioned sense. If your partner or your loved one or someone in the grocery line or whoever, whatever it is on TV, says something, 95, 99% of the time, before you know the difference, you're automatically reacting to your own preconceived idea of what they meant, what it means to you. Already kind of on the defense, already in protective mode, already thinking you know something, already having your own opinion and investment in the game. And that's highly conditional. That is nowhere close to unconditional love, receptivity, listening, hearing, openness, forgiveness. So you're already back on your heels, already responding based on your own idea, not really where they're coming from. It's sort of like put yourself in their shoes. Once again, love your neighbor as yourself and know that you already do treat your neighbor as you treat yourself, and they're treating you as you treat yourself, and you're treating them as you would have them treat you. It's already this reciprocal hall of mirrors thing. But even as a relative body mind, I've always had a hard time with this concept. Well, if I were you, I would da 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 da, or put yourself in my shoes. It's impossible because if you were me, you'd not be you. And if I put myself in your shoes, I would be me in your shoes, not you in your shoes. So that's a fascinating just kind of inquiry where you can see that from the relative spectrum of things, it's never purely clear. It will always be tainted by your filter as this self first. You will experience that person through your own eyes, which is amazing. We're not trying to get away from that. We're just trying to notice our biases and to clean and clear the lens as much as possible and to own back our projection and know when we're doing it and when we're coming from an authentic place. That's also a fine place to stop. And lots of people do. No one is required to take the next step into the ultimate. Just as all of these kind of concepts that I'm bringing to your attention are helping me to clarify my own thinking and system and philosophy and what it is I teach and deliver. So, thank you for that reflection and inspiration. They each seem to reveal a different aspect of the ultimate. So, the ultimate revealed in the projection conversation is ultimate awareness or ultimate I amness. So, if ultimate awareness indicates a kind of cerebral, always already experience, for me, it's kind of, you might say, even the logos, kind of the ultimate filter through which reality or Maya or the world of form is projected onto the screen of awareness. And even in quantum sciences, they're saying the same things that some of my koans are. Only that which is arising in awareness is real. Everything else exists only potentially. I may be getting this backwards, but it's some like in the waveform pattern in those sciences. Sometimes it's a wave and sometimes it's a point. Something like this, depending on if you're looking at it or not. And then you look away and it goes back to the wave, and you look at it and it stops, and you go and you look away and it goes back to a wave. So it literally depends on awareness, consciousness, observation, witnessing, which also means that you cannot avoid anything that you still have unresolved, even in its unresolution. You are not avoiding it. It's affecting you on a daily basis. You're trying to turn away from it, but it's still there. Which also means if it's arising in your awareness, it's relevant for you. No matter how much you'd rather get rid of it, no matter how much you think you've already learned that lesson enough, if it's still here, which includes this physical world. I've gone through dark night periods of my life where I didn't want to be here anymore. And I would wake up every day, here again, out of the deep dreamless void. Here's the world again. Must be relevant. Not for some linear reason of like having a purpose in life, because who cares? You get your purpose in life and then you die anyway. We're here for some deeper working out. So if the world is arising, don't ignore it. If sickness is arising, don't ignore it. You've not done anything wrong. If poverty is arising, don't ignore it. One of you asked a brilliant question on Sunday. What about the victims of these tragic shootings? And I'm not going to go so far as some teachers and say, well, that must have been what was relevant for them, and they signed up for that experience in this life. That's kind of a uncompassionate, detached stance. That may or may not be true, but I am pointing more to where the question is coming from. For you who asked that question, these so-called victims, this experience of tragedy, however close or removed you were from it, whether you knew someone or it was on the news, or whether you didn't hear about it at all and all of a sudden, oh, you just heard about it. Now that it's in your awareness, it's relevant. Now that these victims, whether you know them personally or not, you know them in your awareness. And once again, you know them based on your response to them. So same as you're always only responding to yourself, back to the relative answer to this question, experiencing these people who get killed, first of all, interpreting them as victims, or even interpreting the shooter as a villain or a bad guy and not a victim, him or herself, that's already seeing through your lens. That's already making a situation into something that fits your conditioning. And we do that so automatically to make sense of what we don't understand, and to make it feel nice in a certain category in our experience. But what's most important to me is that you, if it's rising in your awareness, and especially, again, if it's arising, it's relevant. If it's neutral, you can choose what to do with it. If it's charged, then you have something to look at. Then you have something to work with. Remembering that not only if it's charged, the potential that you can draw a line from it to yourself, where you can see, oh, I have the potential to pull the trigger myself. Oh, I can be empathetic. Toward the one I perceive to be at fault because of all the things that I'm at fault for. Innocently so. When I like to defend myself because I got into a situation where I did something I shouldn't have and didn't mean to and want to be forgiven, there's your opportunity to forgive that one as you would have them do unto you. There's many different ways if it's charged, so let's have that list again. If it's arising in your awareness, it's relevant. If it's neutral, you can do what you want. If it's charged, you have to do the work. Because 10 different people with the shooting thing in their awareness will have 10 different responses. That means it's highly subjective. The word subjective means according to the subject that's aware of it. How does it ping you? How does it ping you? How does it ping you? And how are you called to respond? None of this is me saying do nothing. None of this is saying roll over dead. None of this is saying be careless. This is taking responsibility. So, what are you called to do as this situation arises in your awareness? If it's to interact with, relate with, reach out to, give service for that other person, great. Ultimately, it's still for you. Ultimately, still figure out why it bothers you so much or why it inspires you so much, and you give the power away to the outside. I want it also to be made clear, because often when we're talking about projection, we're talking about shadow and bad stuff. And as I said, usually when we're talking about projection, we're talking about sin. And that's why last video I turned it around to injection and forgiveness and the good stuff. So, in the same way, whatever you perceive as true and beautiful and perfect and lovely and amazing, that also is a projection of those very qualities in yourself. Where it becomes quote unquote dangerous, where you should beware, where it could tip over into negative, is believing that quality of beauty, loveliness, perfection, truth, to be outside of yourself, doing something to you. Again, just like the negative, that they're outside of yourself doing something to you. The feeling of beauty, the feeling of loveliness, the feeling of truth, the feeling of joy arises where? Only in you. And this other person, I'm speaking from experience with my beautiful, lovely, perfect wife, has arisen to reflect back your own beauty, to reflect back those best qualities in yourself. Again, the ego can take over and say something like, oh, that's just a projection. All of this really resides in me. It's not you. That's not it either. It's recognizing that the two are one in the same field of ultimate awareness, having an experience of looking at each other. Projection, reflection, projection, reflection. So that's an even greater call for responsibility. How do you respond to the victims? How do you respond when something pings you and turn the attention inward? How do you honor that person, that thing, that event that seems to be separate from you, that's giving you great wonder and admiration and inspiration without making the mistake of giving away your own source of that and not needing them like some kind of vampire to give that to you. They have arisen, you have projected, they have reflected back what you already know about yourself, or what's already there in yourself. That's why it's pinging you in a positive way, positive pings. You just were unaware of it. And then when you become aware of it, it's even more cause for celebration and admiration. You know that they're not ultimately the source of your happiness and fulfillment. But while they're arising, as they're arising, it's relevant for you. And you can utilize that reflection to see your own beauty. I hope these videos, I hope our time together, I hope whoever, whatever I am to you in your field of consciousness is helping trigger this work. Shadow, ego, beautiful, inspirational, edgy. You guys do that for me all the time. On the full spectrum. So ultimately, see if you can draw this conclusion before I give the answer. Ultimately, as this conversation is bringing up ultimate awareness or ultimate I amness, ultimate selfness, ultimate oneness rather than two-ness, not separation. How is it that you're always looking at yourself ultimately? Do 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 do. Because there's only one self. And you are that. Manifesting in the same field and fabric and texture of awareness, all the multiplicities of fabrics and textures and relative fields, miraculously having the ability to identify from a relative place. Again, we're not trying not to do that. The relative experience is here, therefore the relative is relevant. But where's your anchoring? Where's your identity? And don't get them confused. That's the key trick. Don't get them confused. If it's ultimate, it's ultimate. If it's relative, it's relative. This consciousness is beyond explanation, beyond mysterious, beyond wild, beyond words. So the same person who asked this question actually on Sunday started from the place of the ultimate and said, I'm understanding that everything is just awareness. Okay, good. But well, you can pay attention when the but comes in. It's more like and or but and. If it's just but, then you know possibly a compromise is coming. I know all of this is true, but. So I know all this is true. I know there's nothing but awareness. And how come it feels like when I'm looking at another, it's actually another? Because that person and that question stepped down. There were like degrees of separation and sin in the question itself. I know there's an I. I am, there's an I, ultimate. I know I am only awareness. But, step down, I know I am ultimate awareness, but, clunk, that's like a surrender. If you said and, then you keep both. I know that I am ultimate awareness, and I know I am experiencing a relative sense of myself. Question, how do I reconcile the perceived experience of another? But when it's, I know I am only awareness, everything is arising only in my awareness, only that which is arising in my awareness is real, relatively so. But I have this experience. Now all of a sudden it's a different I. But I have this experience, and the ultimate is forgotten. But I have this experience. I know I am ultimate awareness, but I have this experience. It's very quick. All of a sudden, a different mask and a different I is speaking. And it wasn't even that I have this experience, it was just assumed and forgotten that a different mask was put on, and all of a sudden the two got switched. I know I'm ultimate awareness, but when I'm looking at my wife, do you see how quick it was? It's a sleight of hand. She sure seems like another, and then the words she, her, it, that over there. Were we to change our vocabulary to reflect the truth of this stuff, it would be challenging, but it would be more accurate. It might be cumbersome at first, but all language is anyway. And some people do change their reality. Some people do change their language when their reality changes, because it kind of has to. I like to say words make worlds and worlds make words. Anyway, pay attention to where the I principle is coming from, which I is speaking. If ultimately you are not the body-mind, and this kind of field of awareness is not only a third person removed objective thing, because then when something is an objective thing, it's an object in a subject's awareness. So, like, ultimate awareness, ultimate I amness, is intimately a first person perspective. You can say I within it. So even if you're describing something, even if you're describing the ultimate, who's describing it? Who's aware of it to describe it? I. And there's only one I. Remember again, from emptiness to I-ness to amness to nameness. From emptiness to I amness to personness and bodiness, and then otherness. Step down, step down, step down. You can step down as much as you want if you don't forget this anchoring and experience all of this as that. And ultimately, you are doing that. You've never not been doing that. But I'm talking about maintaining consciousness while you do. So see if you can feel that. Remember, at the beginning, you're probably still tainted and conditioned until you have this, oh my God, moment. Don't stop short of that until you know that you're relating from the ultimate. It's better at the beginning for you to just say, yeah, I've caught glimpses of it, but I can't be sure I'm rooted in it yet. Beware of thinking you're rooted in it too soon. That's dangerous. That's why I want to have check-ins regularly with you guys. And beware of thinking, as I've said in other videos, that being rooted in it means like the world goes away or no more friction or no more work. Because again, as the relative experience is still relevant, and it's relevant as long as it's still arising, then no doubt there's some karma, some sin, some cause and effect, some duality that you as ultimate awareness still want to and need to and must simply go through and work out. There's no need to push it away anymore, is the point. And the blind, ignorant, delusional contraction and and misidentification into that softens and even dissolves. But all sorts of things still happen. So beware of this kind of falsified, fantastical ideal, romanticized of what that means or what enlightenment means, and beware of anybody who tells you otherwise. Bliss feels different than your projected understanding of bliss. Happiness, fulfillment, peace, in an ultimate, rooted, anchored, real, not suppressed sense feels highly unique to each individual. It's not bland and lifeless and is expressed differently. For me, it's serving you guys. It's writing. It's making videos. I know that when I'm making these videos, I'm talking first to myself. Yet again, back to that. And when I get done making these and I walk out of this room, I feel like I just received some nourishment. That's why I always implement the practices first. They have to. They're coming through me to you and through me to me back to me. And then I watch my own video back, not because I'm narcissistic, but because I want to continue learning from my own reflection of myself, of what's being projected out onto this computer screen by myself. It's tricky, but what's wrong with being inspired by yourself? I don't know where we got off. Like, you are the closest one to yourself. Again, the ego can take over anything, but there's this kind of overzealous false humility thing about not being inspired by the things that you do, or not liking, especially artists, not loving your own work. Now, the ego can take over when it says, like, well, I'm a genius and my stuff's better than everybody's. That's the ego. That's separation. That's projection. But inspiration, by yourself, from yourself, to yourself, why not? This is a solo journey. This is a hall of mirrors, especially right now, talking to myself. So I watch these videos back, not for self-critique, actually, and not for self-aggrandizement, but for continued learning. And I, as myself, beyond this body-mind anyway, the same self, as I'm saying, as you are, looking through those eyes right now, hearing through those ears right now, feeling through that skin right now, we are the same self. Looking back at itself through each other. And there's nothing else than that. And because we're very conditioned to the body-mind self, it's difficult when we use this word self, like there's only one self, because instantly your mind goes to, like, no, well, this is myself, me-self, and that's you-self, and that's their self, because the same word registers. Even just changing it to a capital letter doesn't always help, but in any case, it's an interior, profound, necessary shift. Because we're taught and conditioned from day one that when we say I, it means the body. When we say I, it means Kemper, which is necessary and important as well. To become what I call a full self, or a healthy, mature, relative self, before then transcending it back to where you came from. Not to prematurely pull the plug before you know yourself as a healthy, full, relative self. Else, why be in this experience? But still, the word I is the same. I is I is I is I is I. You have to distinguish, especially in these conversations with each other, with us in this group, which I are you speaking from? It matters. So as I'm turning up the knob, calling myself to a deeper commitment of taking responsibility in the projection arena, and as our time together is very naturally revealing what's next to talk about, how is this developing and growing and cultivating my thought, my philosophy, what I'm teaching you and what I'm teaching myself, what I'm learning from you, what I'm learning from myself. I'm noticing that the next natural progression after deep projection work, and as a result and inside of deep projection work, and the understanding of ultimate I amness or ultimate awareness, injecting in forgiveness of sins, back to no separation, back to I am the only one aware of anything. The ultimate is all there is, all there is, all there is in truth. The relative is there as well, but with a different kind of truth. And ultimately, the two become one in the direct experience of it. But it's a process. Again, go ahead and assume and give yourself patience and time to go through the process. Go ahead and assume that you're projecting a little bit. Go ahead and assume that you're filtering a little bit. And then, yes, be willing to see when it changes and be healed. True healing is what we're talking about. We're not talking about sinning boldly forever, staying sick forever, sick in the mind, meaning. We're not talking about always a sinner, leading with that bad foot all the time. False sense of humility. A Course in Miracles says, actually, it's not arrogant. Let me get this right. It's not arrogant to say you're not a sinner. It's arrogant to ultimately think you are. It's not arrogant to claim union with God. It's arrogant to believe you're not, and thus have autonomy in and of yourself. Get it? So the next natural progression and the next ultimate to reveal itself inside of and next to and after projection work is the radical understanding of the present moment. And just as ultimate awareness or ultimate I amness reveals something about relative space, relative separation, relative individuation, so does the ultimate present moment reveal something about relative time. Before we go further, I want to take a moment. If you want to pause here, go to the bathroom, take a little break, intermission, or just kind of shift positions and get comfortable, I want to guide you into a reminder of the ultimate present moment. An experience of it now. Remember, if it's ultimate, it's always already the case. You don't have to go anywhere to find it. It can't be contrived or imagined or made up. You don't add anything to your experience to get it. You take everything else away that's not it. So whereas ultimate I amness and spatiality kind of reveals something about here, where is the other arising? Ultimately, here, not over there, or even the perception of over there is arising here. Get it? So does ultimate present moment refer to now. Nowness. So the same as here-ness, you can ask from the perspective of the ultimate. Where does the other arise? You say here. In regards to the present moment, in my memory right now, speaking of that, if I said present moment a while ago, I meant ultimate I amness, ultimate awareness, here-ness. Ultimate present moment, revealing something about time. Nowness. So the question becomes, from the perspective of the ultimate, when did yesterday occur? And you may have already caught a subtle grammar nuance. From the perspective of the ultimate, when does yesterday occur? Now, from the perspective of the ultimate, when will tomorrow occur? And I'll change it again. When does tomorrow occur? Now, the ultimates are also unbroken. And so, as you're getting closer to present moment understanding, if it starts to feel like frame by frame by frame by frame by frame by frame, now and now and now, and this moment, and this moment, and this moment, it's getting there, but that's still a narrow squeeze of the relative. The relative can never be ultimate except in the non-dual relative ultimate oneness, but that's something else altogether. There's a nowness inside of which each now, and past and future arise. Same as there's a here-ness inside of which spatiality, relative presence, over there, over there, over there, over here, arises. Same as there's an I amness inside of which relative I, projected you, other, arise. So now is the only time the only moment same as there is only one self, there is only one moment. It's not a succession of present moments. That's kind of the popular interpretation in the New Age kind of cliche world. That becomes very constricted because the relative present moment tries to push away past and future. As if they don't exist. Again, if it's relevant, then it's arising in your awareness. So to try to ignore past and future, oh, I just don't think about the past. Well, when you say white elephant, when you say don't think about white elephant, what do you think about? Yeah, I don't concern myself with the past. There it is. I just don't want to think about the future. You just made it real. Future doesn't exist. Yes, it does. Right there it did. Again, just like there are steps where you can stop anywhere along the way of injection, taking responsibility, and never make it to the ultimate, that's fine. It's a beneficial exercise to take one relative moment at a time, or small chunks of time. I'm not going to plan further than 5 minutes. I'm not going to plan further than tomorrow. I'm not going to have any regrets about what happened in the past. I'm not going to let my past define me. That sort of stuff. That's good. And let's go deeper. When you see from projection work that there is no other, and that there is no boundary, and that everything is arising as the same fabric and texture and within the same field, and you are that. And that there's no separation, and that nothing can harm you. There's no loss. Nothing bad can happen. That's seen from the ultimate. There are no filters, no cultural conditioning, no projection reflection. It's just all projection from the ultimate, seeing itself as itself, in itself, every moment, right now and right now and right now, from this mirror and this mirror and this mirror. And that there's not a contracted sense where there's necessary or need for fighting or protecting or attacking. Deep trust, deep surrender. Then you see in present moment work that there is no past, there is no future. Again, think about it. Have you ever been in the past ultimately? Anywhere other than as it's arising now? even if there's such thing as time travel. You don't travel to the past. You may travel through time, but still are now. All of these speculations and saying, what if this happened? Those also arise now and here. Often we're reacting to and relating with our speculations. If this thing happens, when it's not happening anywhere else than in your mind now. And then you've already created a scenario and a story and are reacting to it as though it were happening somewhere else, sometime else. And then the way the Hall of Mirrors operates in the relative spectrum of things, if it's unresolved, if it's a nexus knot of fear or separation, then it will manifest in some illusory relative future for you to look at. So it must be relinquished now. Fear resides in the future based on the past. Fear is a projected anticipation based on a lie. And if it's coming from that place, more than likely, it will appear. It will show up. So no need even to be afraid of that happening. But that's good reason and good motivation to do the work now. Eventually, the field itself just becomes clear through this work. That's why it's not just good enough to recognize the ultimate and not do the rest of the work. That's why it's not just good enough to have affirmations, to try to convince yourself. Meanwhile, the source of the trying of the convincing is coming from a place of fear and contraction and need. It needs to be relinquished. You just till the garden, you just do your work, you just meditate, you just clean up, clear up, shape up. And you will know when you know. So for some of you, this gets to be really vulnerable. And I'm admitting, as I'm turning the knob up myself, that I have, same as projection, known this work conceptually and yes, experientially for a while. But there have definitely been pockets, little compartments and categories. One moment, forgive me for this. If that bothered you, ask yourself why. Pockets and areas of my life that I have reserved out of fear justified by lots of different things. OCD brain, justified by the fact that I historically am quite a sensitive person. And because it seems, at least from this now moment, that in the past, over and over and over again, I get affected adversely, which then you already see is a filter of my interpretation that something adverse is happening that I need to be afraid of and protect myself from in the future, that boundaries have been crossed by other people, that I need to be cautious and careful. As I mentioned on Sunday, this it's like an Islamic proverb or something: trust Allah, but tie up your horse. And some people live by that. Like, well, yeah, trust God and everything, but remember the but take care of the practical stuff. Throw that out the window. At the same time, if your field is not clear yet and it's not relevant that you take the next step of this kind of operating and trust, and you still have unresolved things, whatever's unresolved, remember, will show up again. So if you're kind of blindly going to step into trust and not tie up your horse, meanwhile you have a fear that your horse is going to run away or get stolen, then it probably will. See? You have to relinquish that and at the same time trust. So money, illness, I'm not saying, like some of these teachers say, that when you do this, then you'll never get sick, or when you do this, nothing bad can ever happen again because you perceive what's happening differently. It's not bad anymore. Illness is not bad. Poverty is not bad. Homelessness is not bad. Death is not bad. Conflict is not bad. This human experience is not bad. It's not bad. It actually becomes really good. It becomes really sweet. I've been sharing with Christy lately with this recent transbiological endeavor experience that I'm going through, which I've shared with a lot of you. One of the most, probably the most transformative experiences in my life. Through everything, I've had a, pretty positive outlook on things, throughout my life. But at the same time, I've had this kind of overshadowing malaise, or just not feeling great in my body and my mind because of OCD, because of different things. It's like kind of see there again, holding myself to the past. I have historically, in my memory now, gone through periods of melancholy. Now, if I still believe that to be true, it'll continue to be true. Also, if I try to change the belief without actually doing the work and just kind of force its hand to believe, don't be melancholy, see where that's coming from, will also make it continue, interpreting it as a bad thing. In any case, paradoxically so, I can say that I, as a full experience as a result of this work and the most recent period of transformation, feel better, more abundant, fuller, more joyful, more loving, more of all the fruits of the Spirit, more present, more grounded, more clear, more happy. All of these are kind of, actually, you might not believe this, rare for me to say. It's not that I've been faking or anything, but I've been wrestling with some demons for a long time. And it's shifting in a very profound depth. I feel better than I've ever felt. So anyway, don't jump the gun, in other words. As long as the process is here for you to process, it's relevant. So as you see these things clearly, part of what helped me along the way is that with all of the saints and sages and Jesus and the masters that I would read about as a kid and a teenager and young adult, I didn't want to just look up to them and kind of like let them do the heavy lifting for me, and I'll try my best to apply the principles. Oh, but I'm still human. Every single time I wanted to see what they saw. And I knew there was a process for that. They're not just magic wizards. They got there somehow. So I wanted to do my own work to see what they saw, and that's coming to fruition right now. Glimpses along the way, but even deeper rooting now. It takes time. So decide how deeply you want to take this. And I'm fine with whatever. If this is arising in your awareness, you are responsible for it somehow. And I'm rising in your awareness to challenge you and inspire you and trigger you. So as you see clearly, rather than contriving to apply some principles, when you see these things clearly in the ultimate I amness, ultimate awareness, ultimate present moment, ultimate oneness, ultimate no separation, and I'm speaking from experience here. And I'm also calling myself to this right now. Then there is no need, and it's even futile, pointless, to refer to the past to define the present. That's a filter. And then to use that to plan the future. Positive, neutral, or negative. To be afraid of the future. Because what you believe will happen will happen. And it won't even be in the future, because the future never existed for anybody. It's a perpetual unfolding of this moment. And if anything called the future does exist, you just pulled it to yourself here now. But you are always here now. It's an illusion of moving towards something. So it's got to do with the deep undercurrents of unresolution, belief, attachment, and identity including meaning placed on the past, which is just some sort of cord that you have tied to something that's not relatively here anymore, not relatively now anymore, but it's still here. So if it's still here, but not here now relatively, then it's something you call the past, and there's still a string tied to it in your field, which means it has to come up again. It has to come up again. It has to come up again. There's no sense trying to protect or push it away. It's gonna come up again. And consider it a joy when it does while you're still doing your work. But for me, I want to relinquish it. Therefore, no need for rigid rules, no need for protective boundaries. And that feels vulnerable and scary for some of you. Actually, it feels vulnerable and scary for me, but at the same time, it feels very liberating. I don't need to know anything. It's a false sense of security to reference the past to define the future. In the Hall of Mirrors, it'll just play out like that. Reference the past, manifest the future. Reference the past, manifest the future. Not only miss what's happening in the present moment, miss out on a lot of life, but you'll just create this Hall of Mirrors terror. It's like the hell of, it's the ping pong ball hell of time. Same as the bullseye layers, hells of degrees of separation. And then you die. That's how they say you create your own reality, but I don't go so far as trying to create the reality that you want, because again, it's very deceptive and very easy to be deceived by a sense of ego doing the creation, doing the desiring. You actually most likely don't really know what you really want, don't really know what you're really afraid of, don't really know what you're really trying to avoid or get to or reach. It's probably coming from some shadow. So I'm saying do the work, clear it out, and then it doesn't matter what happens. You say with Krishnamurti, I don't mind what happens. But also you'll know even more clearly, but only in the moment. So again, this is not cold, dead, lifeless. This is very alive, with no anticipation, with no aforethought, with no fear, with no boundaries. And it's not even that like, okay, well, I got my boundary in my back pocket just in case I need it. Of course you do. You have everything at your disposal in case you need it. But suffice it to say, now in relative time, as you're just beginning the work, you don't know what you need or not. So just trust, live your life. It's all good. Do the work. And you definitely won't know what you need in the future. But if you go ahead and start planning and manipulating and protecting and preparing, you'll probably magnetize that thing to yourself, make it happen, or miss out on what's really happening. That person is communicating something to you that you think they're saying something else because of your past understanding of them. And back to the beginning of this video, seeing only yourself, fighting only yourself. So forgiveness starts to happen with this injection thing, forgiving the sense of separation in the first place, forgiving yourself for believing there was an other, forgiving the other, and forgiving yourself for holding the other to some idea that you had, no matter how justified. This is radical. And expect, if you say yes to this, and I've already been tested, this stuff's going to come up to see how serious you are. But I see how serious the suffering is when not operating from this place. I see how serious the delusion is when forgetting these things. I see the contraction and the fear and the immobility in myself. I see how I magnetize, project, and reflect all sorts of darkness. And it's directly connected to myself. When I'm operating from these untrue places. So it's a commitment to being fully alive and here for everything, without conditioning, without reference to the past, without anticipation to the future. Without fear of what others may think, because the other is not an other. See how it's the progression? A trust in the benevolence and an expansion beyond your time-space-bound body-mind. For what to eat, what to do. Jesus talked about this, the lilies of the field. Don't worry about tomorrow. Are you willing to take that seriously? Without any yeah buts? I am. And that's what I'm doing. Without compartmentalizing anything to the side like money or politics or the things that we're conditioned, actually. Those things are weaponized against us so that they can feed off of our fear. That's why the spiritual traditions all call for fearlessness. At the same time, this is not calling for do nothing or to be a victim yourself or to be careless and irresponsible. It's actually deep wisdom, discernment, care, responsibility, but not with a preconceived based on the past that doesn't exist, notion based on separation that doesn't exist, into the future that doesn't exist. All of these places we try to exist that don't exist, and it perpetuates. Projecting kind of like our avatar into an illusion, into the matrix. It doesn't exist. Not in truth, not in truth of truth of truth. So if you're not fully firmly rooted, you can take little risks of trust, but beware that when you take a little risk of trust and something manifests back that says, see, you can't trust, then that's probably something for you to look at that you've not resolved. That's not to say now you have to white knuckle your way through changing that belief. It's just you got more work to do. That's where I'm taking it with that's different than the new age kind of law of attraction stuff. When it's clear, it's clear. If it's still relevant, it's still here. And you will know when you know. So don't tempt God. If there's still unresolution, still a belief in something bad happening, still a fear that you might lose your horse, but because I said so, then you leave the horse untied. It has to be in you. At the same time, you got to jump off the cliff at some point. So it's waiting until you're ready and also taking a leap of faith. There's nothing else to do but this work, guys. Your jobs, your family, your careers, your life, your circumstances are just the backdrop stage props. None of that is actually real. Every tradition says the same thing. Now, even science, for those of you who need that. So pay attention to the oscillation between past and future. Might take some time to stabilize. But tune into the ultimate. Again, remember not to confuse relative and ultimate. Present moment. Naked, no filter. It requires stepping back from the conditioned body mind as well. What are we going to do next? What's next? Well, based on what happened last time, what do we do? What do we do now? That has caused me more suffering. And because of this OCD program, which I believe the final little combo code of it can be unlocked with this recent knob notch turn up that I'm doing. Because I make rigid rules projected into the future out of fear based on some past that doesn't exist and therefore perpetuates. I'm saying all of this from experience and I'm done with it. Love keeps no record of wrongs. It means not holding anybody to the past, to who they were, to your perception of them now based on that, based on fear, based on your own unresolved shit. Because also you remember they're not other anyway. It's all you, all you, all you. The future that you've been striving for out of fear or need or longing or all of these things to get something, to fill a void, has never arrived anyway. And even if you got that thing, it didn't work. So we're talking about a wisdom that's always already. And that wants to be activated. It means there are no decisions to make. In the Old Testament somewhere it's like, and whether you turn to the left or to the right, you will guide my steps, O Lord, something like that. You don't have to know beforehand. You don't know anyway. We just pretend to know. And because of the Hall of Mirrors, it seems like we knew. See, I told you it was going to happen again, told you it was going to happen again. That's because that's the way it's set up. It's wild. I'm choosing and declaring to not know, to not need, and to know that I will know, and to know that I know in the moment. Again, at the beginning, if you're coming from the ego, coming from shadow, coming from relative body mind, be discerning, beware of that. That's why it requires time, work, commitment, patience, all 5 basics. If you're not ready for this, then you're not ready for this. But just like everything else, I'm showing you how I do the work on my own. I'm kind of giving you a morphic field to aim for. Again, not for some future outcome, but because it feels right now. I hope you see also the very direct reason, purpose, practicality of this stuff. And how the cliches are true and how we've totally missed them. And I'm trying to bring them back in their authentic depth. Namaste.